include if the property is not being used and there's no intention to develop or make money from it, or when it poses a risk to people. The majority of South Africa's farmland is currently owned by the white minority. The 2017 land audit says black people, who make up over 80% of the population, only own 4% of farmland held by individuals, more than 30 years after the end of apartheid. So, the ANC's idea with this bill is to help rebalance who owns South Africa's land. Concerns about how the law could be used feature prominently in AfriForum's YouTube video. So I asked Kali about land expropriation.
Remember, this Expropriation Act was only published on the 24th of January. So it's a very short time. What we have seen is land grab
By the state.
Due to lack of action by the state.
Was it by the
No,
state?
no, no. We've never said it was by the state. But what we've said, there are acts by the state that makes it hard for people. If people come on your land and they build something that you cannot, without going to court, do that.
To be clear, what Callie's talking about here is poor people building shacks on farmers' land as a means of housing. This is something that happens in South African society, often angering farmers who own the land. However, it's not the same as land seizures by the state without compensation.
We also asked Friendlin, a farmer in Mpumalanga province, about the expropriation bill.
In my gut, I just don't have a happy feeling about this. So what's going to happen is farmers are worried about and just sell and go.
While the ink has barely dried on the new expropriation law, experts say that it isn't drastically radical. It mainly clarifies existing powers. The president of South Africa has tried to calm fears, posting on X, the law is not a confiscation instrument.
Let's look at Trump's actions and words towards South Africa then. In February, he signed an order to cut assistance to South Africa, which was worth $440 million in 2023. There are also fears that the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, which has created hundreds of thousands of jobs by providing tariff-free access to America for South African wine, citrus, soybeans, sugarcane and beef, could be scrapped and replaced with a 30% trade tariff. Trump has also threatened to boycott the G20 summit of world leaders in Johannesburg. Plus, of course, there is that White House offer of resettlement to Afrikaners.
Given that AfriForum's argument is that they are unsafe in their own country, both from land confiscation and farm matters, I wondered if Kali intends on taking up President Trump's asylum offer.
No, and there's a definite reason for that. But we would rather see a solution here in South Africa. We can only, as a cultural community, survive in Africa.
None of the farmers that we've spoken to in the making of this program say they'll take up the offer to go to the United States. In March, the South African Chamber of Commerce in the USA said its website received nearly 70,000 registrations from South Africans seeking more information about moving. In May, the first group of 59 white South Africans arrived to settle in the US.
President Trump's inner circle contains several white people born or raised in South Africa, including, until recently, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world. Musk, who has lived in the US for over 30 years, has peppered his ex-account since January with false claims about South Africa, including that there is a white genocide taking place here. To understand why, I spoke to his dad, Errol. Some people are saying Elon and President Donald Trump are using X to spread disinformation about South Africa.
No, you can't spread this information on X because it is too policed. It has AI Grok policed in.
Of course, as regular listeners to Trending will know, it is possible for misinformation to spread on X. The platform is policed in a loose way, and while misinformation tends to receive a community note, Musk's white genocide claim did not.
I'm trying to understand what's his interest to the issues that are happening here in South Africa.
Saying his big company, one of the biggest is Starlink, And so his interest in South Africa came about recently, largely because of the difficulty of having Starlink deployed in South Africa.
Starlink is Elon Musk's satellite internet service. It works in many countries, but using it is not yet legal in South Africa. In order to get the telecom licenses required, Starlink would need to give 30% ownership to historically disadvantaged groups like the majority black population who were shut out of the economy during apartheid. The South African government say this 30% rule is an attempt to tackle the racial injustices of the past. In March, Musk claimed that Starlink is not allowed to operate in South Africa simply because he's not black. The telecom regulatory body told the BBC in April that Starlink had not submitted an application for a license in South Africa. The South African government has proposed a workaround where IT companies like Starlink will be allowed to operate if they invest in infrastructure or in small and medium-sized black-owned businesses.
There's also Israel. We mustn't forget that there's the Israel factor. So that's also what's happening concurrently to the issue of ASEAN.
That's independent political analyst Kanye Magubane. She says that South Africa's decision to take Israel to the International Court of Justice, alleging that Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, has played into recent diplomatic tensions with the US. Trump's Presidential Action Directive also claims South Africa has taken aggressive positions towards the United States and its allies, including accusing Israel, not Hamas, of genocide in the International Court of Justice. So farm attacks, land expropriation, Starlink, and the decision to pursue Israel in the ICJ. Whatever the reasons are for the soured diplomatic relations and dramatic tweets between the US and South Africa, it's important to remember that there are real-life consequences to people's livelihoods, both in South Africa and the surrounding countries who depend on it economically.
Slashing financial assistance, escalating tariffs, and potentially scrapping the African Growth and Opportunity Act, also known as AGOA, could all do sizable economic damage to a country that already struggles with mass unemployment. The wider context is that the US has also frozen funding for its emergency plan for AIDS relief, which contributes about 17% to South Africa's HIV/AIDS program. Johan Gutierrez says he tried to caution representatives of the White House about portrayals of South Africa.
You're disturbing the middle grouping in South Africa. You're not creating unity. You're not creating the economic stability. You're actually fueling radicalism.
That's it this week for BBC Trending. Thanks to Umpo Lakaje, Peter Mwai, and Gareth Jones for mixing this episode. Our editor was Flora Carmichael. Thank you for listening. Trending will be back at the same time next week here on the BBC World Service.
BBC World Service, now sporting witness with me, Jake Warren. I'm taking you back to Kigali, the capital of Rwanda, in April 1994, when football saved Eric Marangwa Eugene's life.
I was woken up by a sound of many shootings around the city, and within a few hours, the whole country was turned upside down. I was also attacked by a group of soldiers who had come to the house where I was living with a friend of mine. This guy who had come into my house with a machine gun and determination to kill me, once he realized I was the guy who he supported, I equalized and everything changed. I ceased to become his enemy and become his hero again. That moment has pretty much become a key part of how my life changed. That moment demonstrated an incredible power of sport.
That's Rwandan former professional goalkeeper Eric Murangwa Eugene. He is a survivor of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. Eric is a Tutsi, one of the two main ethnic groups in Rwanda, the other being the Hutus, who form the majority. After decades of tensions and 4 years of civil war, in 1994, the country exploded. Eric lived through 100 days that saw approximately 800,000 of his fellow Tutsis systematically, ethnically cleansed throughout the country. The story of how he survived is a tale of both chance and resilience. In the years before the Civil War, Eric was playing football at the highest level in Rwanda for the country's biggest football club, Rayon Sports.
As a young man, football was my passion and refuge in many ways. When I was growing up, it was during this period where the problems of Hutu and Tutsi really exploded. The issue of ethnicity or politics were not subject to discuss in my home. I started understanding much more when I started the primary school, when teachers would ask children to stand up and tell which ethnicity they come from. For me, it was very confusing because there is no actual difference between the two, other than those two names, one called Hutu and another called Tutsi.
Discrimination against the Tutsi minority was massively exacerbated by the Rwandan Civil War, which began in 1990. And sport wasn't immune from the increasingly volatile situation.
Between 92 and 94, it even became worse to the point where I could no longer go with my club to play in the north because at the time intimidation had, gone beyond intimidation, and there had been some killings of people in the stadiums and even some football players who were Tutsi.
Things reached a climax on the 6th of April 1994 when the plane carrying the Hutu president of Rwanda was shot down.
The Rwandan ambassador to the UN said that the plane was hit by rocket fire.
Responsibility for the assassination is still disputed, but Hutus blamed the Tutsi rebels, and this deadly spark set in motion one of the bloodiest moments of the late 20th century. A group of soldiers came to Eric's house the very next day.
And they came in really accusing us to be part of those who they said had killed the president. So we tried to say that we were just merely football players, we had nothing to do with politics, but they were not really listening to us. So they went around the house pretending to look for weapons that they said we had. They stumbled on a band of photo albums, and this album was full of my football club photos. It captured the attention of this soldier, and then he asked me, "Are you Toto?" And I said, yes, I am.
Toto was Eric's nickname, meaning young boy. He was given it when he first started playing football for Rayon Sports.
This soldier happened to be a fan of Rayon Sports. That basically became the reason why my life and the life of my housemate was spared. Because this guy, as soon as he recognized who I was, he changed, completely changed. You could see it in his face. And for the next 5-10 minutes, all he wanted to talk about was football.
This extraordinary moment was just the start of Eric's ordeal. Over the coming weeks, he would move around various houses as he sought to escape the wrath of Hutu militias. He first went to stay with some of his teammates at Rayon Sports, a mix of Hutus and Tutsi. But when things there became too dangerous, they suggested another, extremely unlikely safe place.
They advised me to go and seek refuge to one of our football club fans, who was also known to be among the top leaders of the militia movement in the country. I thought he had gone mad, and I said, "How can you say that? We know who this guy is. If I go there, he will kill me myself." I went to this man's house, and incredibly, when he saw me, he was happy to see me, and he would obviously spend the whole day away doing what I don't know, but let alone it was became obvious that he was part of the killings that were taking place around the city. Yes, he saved my life because he believed I would be able to go back and play football and make him happy.
After a week, the militia leader had to leave, and so Eric was dropped at a more conventional safe haven, the International Red Cross. But due to the security situation, they wouldn't let him in. Eric spent 2 days living on the street outside the Red Cross compound, in limbo and in terror. Finally, a Red Cross worker was able to make a deal to move Eric to the Hotel de Nil Colline. It was a safe haven for Tutsi refugees, with over 1,000 taking shelter there.
The Hotel Nil Colline is a hotel where the famous Hotel Rwanda film was depicted from. When I arrived there, it was quite a normal place, but we also had a sense of togetherness.
Eric stayed in the hotel until the end of May 1994, when a deal was struck to evacuate some Tutsis from Kigali. The conflict finally ended in July of that year, when Tutsi rebels won the civil war. Eric returned to Kigali a month later. Surveying the wreckage of his home, Eric found that some 85 members of his extended family had been killed.
Straight away, I just went to play football again. Yeah, football became my only way of adapting to this new life. Rayon sport had been completely decimated like every other thing, and it was my personal mission to rebuild it again. By November, we played a football match against our all-time rival. We played this game, and it became the first ever public event to really take place post-genocide, and it changed pretty much everything. It really gave hope to Rwandans that life was back again. It shows you that sport has this tremendous power to influence people in the way that nothing else can.
Eric now serves as the CEO and co-founder of the Ashami Foundation, a charity which uses sport and storytelling as tools to build equality, tolerance, and lasting peace in Rwanda and the UK. Eric Marangwa Eugene was speaking to me, Jake Warren, for Sporting Witness. It was a Message Heard production.
This is the BBC World Service, asking if Chile's copper mines can keep pace with the world's soaring demand.
It has made this South American nation rich, but at what cost to its own environment?
The energy transition is going to entail some very significant environmental harm and also harm to human beings.
The Copper Kingdom, Thursday at 8:30 and 19 GMT. In half an hour, join Claudia Hammond for Health Check. We're looking at the outbreak of Mpox in Sierra Leone and how the virus is spreading so rapidly. And we've got lots on healthy aging today, including why you need to preserve muscle power as well as muscle strength. And could a few cups of coffee a day make a difference? This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
This is Alex Ritson with the newsroom. Reports the killer of a lawmaker in the U.S. state of Minnesota dressed up as a policeman to trick his way into his victims' homes.
We're asking for the public's help in locating Vance Luther Bolter, the 57-year-old white male. Do not approach him. You should consider him armed and dangerous.
Tanks roll through Washington in a parade to mark 250 years of the U.S. Army.
Time and again, America's enemies have learned that if you threaten the American people, our soldiers are coming for you. Your defeat will be certain, your demise will be final, and your downfall will be total and complete.
Large crowds gather in cities across the U.S. to protest against Donald Trump. Iran launches a new wave of missiles at Israel as the Israeli Air Force strikes targets in Tehran. And the FIFA Club World Cup kicks off with Egypt's Al Ahly taking on Inter Miami in Florida. First, the news. Hello, I'm Chris Barrow with the BBC News. Iran has launched a fresh overnight attack on Israel, while the Israeli armed forces say they're still striking military targets in Tehran. The Iranian oil ministry says the Shahran oil depot in the capital has been hit in the latest strikes. David Bamford reports.
Israel said it's completed a large wave of air attacks on Tehran, targeting buildings linked to Iran's nuclear program, including the defense ministry. Israeli jets also struck fuel depots near the city, setting them on fire. There are no details of casualties. Iran has fired 2 waves of missiles into Israel overnight. At least 3 people were killed in Tamra, a residential neighborhood near Haifa in the north of the country. There are also reports of missile or shrapnel impacts in central Israel. Pictures taken in Bat Yam, south of Tel Aviv, show extensive damage. Explosions have also been heard in Jerusalem.
Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump have discussed the conflict between Israel and Iran in a 50-minute phone call. A Kremlin spokesman, Yuri Ushakov, said the conversation was frank and useful.
The exchange of opinions naturally focused on the dangerous escalation in the Middle East. Vladimir Putin condemned Israel's military operation against Iran and expressed serious concern about a possible escalation of the conflict, which would have unpredictable consequences for the entire Middle East.
A deep search is taking place in the US state of Minnesota for a man who shot dead a Democratic Party politician and her husband. Police have named the suspect as Vance Luther Bolter. The 57-year-old is accused of killing Melissa and Mark Portman at their home early on Saturday. Democratic Senator John Hoffman was also shot and wounded in a nearby town. Officials say the attacker was dressed as a policeman. Donald Trump is overseeing a large military parade in Washington as mass protests take place across the United States against his leadership. The multi-million-dollar event, marking the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army, coincides with the president's birthday. Mr. Trump addressed the crowd.
Every other country celebrates their victories. It's about time America gets to that's what we're doing tonight. And watching this magnificent display, our souls are filled with gratitude for every generation of warriors who have worn the uniform all the way back to the very beginning.
Critics say the event is a vanity project and a waste of taxpayers' money. Ahead of the parade, tens of thousands of people from international organizations accusing Mr. Trump of oppressing civil rights and displaying increasingly authoritarian tendencies. BBC News. The former president of France, Nicolas Sarkozy, has been stripped of the country's highest honour as a result of his conviction for corruption. Mr. Sarkozy was awarded the top rank of the Legion d'Honneur in 2007 when he took office. He was found guilty of bribing a judge